Okay, forming a neighborhood solar financing nonprofit corporation. It doesn't have to be Lubbock or this region. A lot of this same information would seem to apply to other places. Like I said, I'm not a tax professional or have a lot of experience in this, but just some of the thoughts that have been coalescing in my mind around reading the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the revisions in there. Okay, so the possible entities involved. Okay, at the top you have the nonprofit corporation, a member-owned nonprofit corporation. I don't know, the way I read a lot of the provisions in the IRA around the Justice 40 and otherwise are trying to help, homeowners, renters, low-income people, low and moderate income communities try to gain more access to ownership and some more power in this dynamic of energy ownership. So the homeowners and the renters would be the members in this nonprofit corporation. I'll get to that later. Of course, the landlords, anyone who owns property where you're thinking about putting the facilities, are going to be part of the equation. The utilities and the retail energy providers, of course, financial institutions, banks, credit unions, small businesses, nonprofits, and how they'll fit in. Okay, so what are the purposes of this nonprofit corporation? Why would you form this? Once again, any nonprofit, you're trying to have some sort of mission of community service, helping communities that aren't often helped sometimes. And so, once again, a lot of the provisions in the IRA are around this type of focus of trying to help these communities. So that's this one down here. Focus on low and middle income and disadvantaged communities described in the Justice 40 provisions and otherwise in the Inflation Reduction Act. Support energy independence and ownership of solar and associated assets for homeowners and renters. And then the reason that this may work is, once again, like some of the provisions in the IRA, the 30%, even before the IRA, it was difficult for some homeowners to get the 30% ITC because they don't have any tax liability. Renters, it's almost impossible to, except for some community solar type of projects, to get the 30%. And now with the adders, there's a lot, they're not available to homeowners either. So they won't be able to get the 10% manufactured content adder, 10% energy community adder, or the 10 or 20% low income adders. You would think they would be able to with the low income adders, but it's not directly available to them, only through possible lease arrangements or power purchase agreements where they might benefit from the financial aspects. And that's where this nonprofit would come in terms of being the owner of those assets, leasing to low-income people. But since the nonprofit is member-owned, in a sense, the homeowners and members have the ability to vote on the board, be on the board, be involved with decision-making on how their own assets are being managed. Now, much like a credit union, I'm a member of a credit union. I haven't voted on the board for either credit union I'm in, and haven't been involved very much. And that may very well be the way this is for a lot of homeowners, besides getting lower energy bills. But still, I think it's important to have credit unions for people who want that option, who want to have some ownership, have some say if some things go wrong, or have some ability to, fight back if there is a problem. Say you're a renter and your landlord decides they don't want to do the program anymore, and if like in community solar, you might not have much options. You may have options there as well, but you have a group of people behind you who has a contract with the owner and say, hey, you can't break this contract. Or if you're a homeowner and you're in a lease and the solar company does something wrong, normally you don't have any way to fight back against that or uphold your rights. Here you might have a little bit more ability because you're once again part of this, you're part member of this nonprofit that owns the asset. So, and then the other thing about nonprofits, of course, you can sometimes apply for different funding or grant programs that might not otherwise be accessible to businesses or cooperatives. Maybe the REAP program is really large, rural energy assistance program, really big grant funding for solar, and then might be easier to sell renewable energy credits as that market gets going. In Lubbock, we've never had the ability to. The LP&L local provider does not allow that, from what I understand. So, okay. So the homeowners, renters, single family, multifamily, and duplex, what are the benefits for them? Hopefully, lower electric bills from savings, the nonprofit leverage through the tax credit, direct payments. Direct payments now with changing the IRA allow nonprofits to get these payments that wouldn't otherwise be available to homeowners. Hopefully the nonprofit, they would have to pass these savings along to the homeowners. Member ownership, talked about that a little bit. The third one is sort of just a gimmick in a way. You could either lower, utility rates, the rates that they have to pay to the nonprofit through the lease, or you could lower them less and give them a sort of, sometimes people like tax refunds. So like the same time the nonprofit got the direct payment during tax season, they could pass those savings along to the homeowners. Better financing rates through the IRA, loan guarantees and grant funding. The nonprofit can procure. I don't know a lot about these. This is another part of the $20 billion that is coming after the $7 billion solar for all grant funding. Supposed to be a lot of loan guarantees and other things. So hopefully those would translate into some better deals that maybe could be leveraged through the nonprofit. Possible, instead of financing through credit unions, banks, maybe there'd be bond financing through the members themselves or other entities. That'd be another income stream for them. At maybe lower, buy-ins and buying solar, kind of a crowdfunding type thing. It has a lot of regulatory things which I'm not familiar with, but we have to learn about. Potentially more accessible option than traditional community solar, especially here in Lubbock. There isn't any community solar. Some states, some, it's hard in Texas. I know there is some. I think there's some community solar in Austin and different places, but it's very, it's much more complicated. I'll get to that in another slide. But for the homeowner, this potentially, you just go through us. We are the ones that have, actually get the financing. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about signing up through the utility to do this. It's handled in the same way as normal retail provider would. After 5 years, after the what you call it, but the period that the lease owner has to own the property in order to qualify for a lot of these tax credits and otherwise clawbacks and stuff, the homeowners can potentially own the system. They may no longer be in the nonprofit, but then they would own their own system, probably have lower costs in the long run. EV charging or off-grid capabilities, of course, you can put some of that stuff in, batteries, inverters, and such. And then build trust in the nonprofit. That just means that if it has good status, if the nonprofit is trusted, then a lot of homeowners and renters, it's hard to trust solar companies sometimes. You don't know who's who and what's what. nonprofit, you're not trying to make a profit. So sometimes that translates into greater trust. Okay, the owners, what's in it for them? So there's a lot of different ways that owners can look at things, of course. I don't know. I haven't been in this trying to convince owners of properties to go solar, but a lot of times the problem is that, oh, I don't pay the electric. There's no point in me doing solar if I'm not going to be getting anything. Sometimes they think they can rent it for more. That may be true. So I didn't put that one down, but sometimes you might need to have a little bit of a rental or, lease easement fee or something to um, push it over the edge where they're willing to do this. Of course, the landlord would still have responsibility for everything after the meter, as any landlord would, but anything that's dealing with the solar, then they wouldn't have responsibility to um, deal with that. It may be a little less. I mean, it might not be much different than with the utility now, but if the nonprofit does a good job responsive to their members, the members or owners once they're part of the nonprofit, then maybe they'll get there faster and get things done quicker, maybe. A lot of people, owners in particular, might be like, oh, I don't want to put anything on my roof. What if I have to replace the roof? And so the idea is, maybe put a carport or something that they wouldn't own necessarily, but they would be on their property, or a awning in the parking lot if they have bigger properties. You can put EV charging in there fairly easily at the time, and market people like shade for their vehicles, and this would be a way for them to do this without any cost, really, make money off it actually. So and they could advertise certain battery inverter combinations that they would be outage proof, right? Okay. Utilities and retail energy providers. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier a little bit, but compared to traditional solar, community solar, no new interconnection infrastructure needed, no subscribers, no hassles. I would maybe there's some hassles, but with a community solar farm, you have to go through the utility, you have to set up infrastructure, you have to buy land, maybe you have to get all the tenants bought into that. You have to sell, get the utility to credit their bill in the amount of some sort of net metering probably arrangement. It's not easy, and our particular utility here probably doesn't want to deal with that, even more so than maybe other utilities that are wanting to do that more. They're already comfortable with lease and power purchase agreements. Most places, arrangements with solar. We do have a little problem as far as I have heard that South Plains Electric outside of Lubbock, made it illegal to do lease power purchase agreements. So that, I'll get to that with pitfalls. It's like, well, maybe we can convince them otherwise if they see so not. I think part of the reason they did that is because homeowners sometimes have problems with leases and they call up the utility or complain about it. And so if this is more of a trusted organization that's not going to be, owned by the members themselves, sort of, maybe that would be a bridge to change that type of thinking. And of course, they already have practice transfer payment responsibility from tenant to landlord and back when tenants move in and out. A little bit different with community solar, probably. It's not like there's not difficulties with any sort of large apartment complex and like divvying up the the electricity to each of the tenants proportionally to what they use, or whatever arrangement you want to do. So it's not like the owners of these properties, it's going to be without effort to try to set some things up. But there's new things, I think solar share, there's other types of equipment that can be used to try to make it as simple and easy for everyone as possible. All right. So the financial institutions, banks, credit unions, this isn't new, but everybody like, oh, how do we open up this solar to all these people that are generally shut out of solar, and this, I think a lot of what the funding for these in the greenhouse gas reduction fund, the 20 billion is like figuring that out, like how are we going to do that? And so this is not, like I said, this is not a unique idea. I think people are going to do something along these lines in a lot of ways. And some of the tax credits, the low income tax credits, kind of specifically prioritize people that have something like this, that are developers that have something like this, in order to prioritize them over larger businesses. And working with trusted nonprofit is easier than working with each individual solar project separately. That's a lot of banks, credit unions don't get into solar because it's a little bit complicated sometimes. They don't want to figure all that out, and each one is different. You have to check. This gets into the next one. You don't have to check the creditworthiness of all new applicants. The nonprofit will do a lot of that work, because they're the members. Once again, it's like, are these people going to actually be able to pay? And the loan guarantees, how do those work? And so the last one is sort of the same thing. It's like, you don't have to, as a bank or credit union, you don't have to understand all the Byzantine federal regulations surrounding tax credits, grant funding, and loan guarantees. Okay. So this is primarily focused on promoting ownership to homeowners and renters, but other entities can benefit. There's educational information gained through the process. I'd say open source here. You could also have certain consulting services available once you get up going. That would help anyone who wants information about all this, as long as it keeps going. Get into that with pitfalls, and many small businesses also don't qualify for many tax credits because of lack of tax equity. There's transferability now, and maybe they'll be easier to do for them, but they might also just want to go through some of these routes instead. It's not like you can't have businesses at least from you either, I don't think. I'll law against that. So definitely opportunity there. So future work, grant funding to lay the groundwork for achieving nonprofit status, solidifying legal framework, forming a core group of volunteers, further buy-in from all stakeholders. Obviously, if nobody understands the structure, if they don't want to do this, if they're thinking more on the lines of business opportunities or something, it might not be exactly what they're looking for. People don't want to go solar. If you can't get people to understand why this benefits them, it's not going to work. And then, locating financial institutions willing to partner is also obviously once again, I think a lot of this 20 billion in the greenhouse gas reduction fund is going towards, larger nonprofits. It's sort of along these lines of trying to figure this out. So, but every local, more localized types of structures, I think, will help, because it is very like, oh, who is this person? Are they creditworthy? Are they somebody who can work with this? You need people on the ground to kind of go over all that stuff instead of just like, oh, let's do it online, and it doesn't always work for everybody, especially people who don't have access to the internet and different things like that. So, okay, so the pitfalls, sort of the opposites of all the next steps is, is this a legal framework? I'm not a lawyer. not a tax accountant. I'm just trying to learn this stuff as I go, and so there's lots of things in here that's like, oh, will that actually work? You know, would it be better set up as a cooperative or some other structure that's benefit corporation? You know, is there some other way that you could have even more tax credits, or make it easier, or uh, fulfill the mission of this idea better? So you're gonna have to get in and see about that. Once again, lack of buy-in from any or all stakeholders. You know, once again, like, I am not a tax professional, so the first part of just like convincing people that this might be possible, if it's worth their time to set up, that it's worth funding through a grant to try to take advantage of some of these tax credits. You know, we're in a fairly conservative place here in Lubbock. You know, are people going to not be for solar for certain reasons? Unable to find institutional financial partners. I think that eventually, if you got it going, you could find some, especially with some of this money that's coming around. Maybe not locally, maybe hopefully locally, but. And then political uncertainty, obviously, if the law gets repealed, or like I said earlier, like if LPNL or something outlawed power purchase agreements, or, you know, if they went the way of South Plains Electric, then it's like, this is not going to work very well. All right. So, thanks.